Hello and welcome to the Comic Conspiracy episode 518 for the week of September 27th, 2021. My name is Ryan Higgins. Who's here this week with me?
Brock Sager.
And Charlie.
And we have two very, very special guests. I should always ask how to pronounce people's names that I don't know off the top of the before we start recording, but I'll do this on the fly. Heath, Amodio, I believe that's correct.
Holy
yes,
crap. Yeah, you nailed
Amodio.
it. That's rare.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a rarity.
Nice job.
I always like to double check, and of course I didn't this time. And Cullen Bunn, longtime comic book writer, worked for at this point, is there a company you haven't written for?
Yeah, there's a few, but they, they hang their heads in shame. So let's not dwell.
They're on the list. Well, we'll get into why you guys are here in a minute. Here to talk about a comic called The Heathens coming up from Aftershock Comics, as well as some other work you guys are doing. But before we get to that, we always like to ask our guests their secret origin for comic books, like how you got into comics as a fan. I'm assuming you were a fan before you started working in the industry. Kid, high school, college age, as an adult, what are you reading now? What type of books do you like in general? And of course, for both of you, you're both creatives, and Cullen, obviously, you've done a ton of work. Give us for people out there that maybe have not read as much of your work as all of us in the podcast here, kind of give us a couple of your biggest hits and a couple things you want people to check out outside of the books we're going to talk about here as well. Heath,
Sure.
you wanna start us off?
Sure. I started reading comics at a really young age. My grandfather used to take me down to the Black Dirt in Florida, New York, and where they work on all the onions. And there was a milk crate in this warehouse that had really old comics that I wish I could get my hands on right now, with how this market is. But from there, it went to my mother would buy me anything so long as it was something to read. And it was a lot of Archie's Digests and grocery stores and things off spinner racks. And then even though my town's only like a mile and a half long, we somehow miraculously ended up with a comic book shop. And it was 2 blocks from my house. So I was there every day. And, from picking up things like Spawn and Savage Dragon, because that was around the time those were dropping, I started getting home subscriptions to, Jim Lee's X-Men and What If, and kind of spiraled from there. So I'd always wanted to write in comics. And it's funny, The Heathens through Aftershock is going to be my second published work. The first was in Cullen's Passages in Black, a short story anthology that he adapted into graphic novel format. But I was actually supposed to be published by Marvel like almost 10 years ago through their Epic line. Before that all fell apart, I wrote a What If Uncle Ben Hadn't Died? And I was really surprised they wanted to publish it because it got dark. The Punisher snapped Aunt May's or Uncle Ben's neck, and Spider-Man kind of went the Punisher route rather than the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man route. So, it was a really dark comic for the time, and surprisingly they were going to publish it, but then, Marvel wasn't what Marvel is now. Obviously
about 10. That's about when Epic kind of went away. So that would have been right at the tail end of it, huh?
Yeah, I think it was literally would have been the very last thing they did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How'd you get hooked up with Marvel? Even to pitch that or anything, you just out of the blue pitched it, or knew someone that worked there, or you just
as Cullen will attest to, I will email anyone. I don't care who you are, and it's knock on wood, it's worked out in my favor a majority of the time.
That's what you got to do.
So I reached out to a couple editors that were there at the time, and they happened to like it, and they when Epic kind of fell apart, they had me start submitting for the at the time they were doing X-Men and Spider-Man short stories.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long that lasted, but it was like 11 pages. It couldn't have any backstory. It had to end in the 11 pages. So, I thought I wrote a couple pretty good ones, but they just never ended up using them. And then both editors left shortly after.
So as far as you're reading in the early '90s, it's about the same time as myself, Brock, and Charlie, probably right about the same age. Did you keep reading like through high school or after high school, college, or did you kind of give it up? I know a lot of people tend to sort of drift away and then kind of come back when they get a little bit older, or you kind of you're like us, like we just kind of, I think all three. Well, myself and Charlie kind of went straight through. Brock, you had a pretty big break.
Yeah, I stopped. I read after high school for a bit and then stopped, and then would randomly grab stuff here and there, and then came back when I walked into the store and we had that wonderful interaction of, "You still work here?" And you're like, "Bitch, I own the place." I was like, yeah, okay, well, that's a little better.
Well, I mean, I never had a break, to be honest. My taste had changed. I went from strictly Marvel, DC to a lot more of the indie stuff. Got away from reading a majority of the superhero comics. Like, I stuck with my favorites, obviously the X-Men, for as long as they were good. And my favorite characters are like Tim Drake, which is going through some changes now. And a lot of the X-Men characters, Taskmaster, I absolutely still adore. I would love the opportunity to write that character, but I started getting more into Cullen's indie stuff and Lemire, and started to get more into the writers and the artists than the actual characters, so to speak. Started following specific people. But I mean, I'm in heaven if I walk into a room or a warehouse full of long boxes with back issues. I could spend, you can ask my ex, it's probably part of the reason she's my ex, but I would spend 8 hours in a big ass room just looking through back issues and love it. And I'm not looking to flip. Like, I just love collecting. I almost have the entire first run of Daredevil. I think I need 13 comics, and of course most of them are in the first 13. But yeah, no, I love it and have always loved it, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, especially with the kind of focus on creators over characters in the indie stuff. I find most people tend to gravitate that way as they get older. I still have superhero comics, read a ton of them, but you do follow the creators a lot more because you know who these people are. And when I was growing up, like, I really didn't know, early, but as time went on, I was reading like Sandman, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Neil Gaiman. Who the hell is this guy? Like, I gotta follow this guy. What else has he done? So yeah, you tend to not look at that when you're younger, but when you get older, yeah, you really look at it. Cullen, let's go to you. So besides, at this point, like I said, writing for, at basically every company, I'm sure you've had a history of reading comics too. When do you start us off? What'd you like? Where'd you start?
Well, I guess probably a lot like Heath. I started reading comics at a very, very young age. I grew up in the glorious era that is no longer in existence, where you could go to a garage sale and buy a stack of 50 comic books for a couple of dollars. And my dad would go and buy me stacks of random comics and bring them home to me. And we used to go to a flea market. There was a guy who sold grocery sacks full of 50 Marvel comics for $5. And I would buy those groceries. I'd save up my money every week, and I'd go and I'd buy a grocery sack of Marvel comics or DC comics. And I used to go to the grocery store and I'd buy, right off the spinner rack at the grocery store and things like that. And then, obviously as time went on, I discovered comic book stores, and I started going to comic shops. But I can easily say I was collecting comics when I was 4 or 5 years old. I was buying and collecting comics. I did when I got a little older, around college age, I stopped collecting comics, and I had arguably one of the best collections anywhere around in my geographic vicinity when I stopped collecting. I mean, I had a complete run of X-Men, Amazing Fantasy 15, a
Wow.
near complete run of Amazing Spider-Man, and I sold them to pay for college. And I wish I hadn't, but I sold them to pay for college, and got out of collecting. I was still reading a little bit, but I wasn't really as diehard as I was before that. And I got back into it a little bit, and I still I have a collection now. It's nowhere near what it was, but
Yeah.
I still buy them and read them now, but not as not as aggressively, I'd say, as I did back then. Mainly because I had my dad helping me collect them. I had my dad's finances helping feed that beast.
I was going to ask, how many teenagers are buying Amazing Fantasy 15? Unless it's the 60s or 70s. Even when you get into the 80s, I mean, those books started to go for hundreds of dollars, not the hundreds of thousands that they do now, but so, they were they started to get up there in price.
Yeah, I remember because my dad was not into comics. He was not a reader of comics, but he liked that I liked them, and he loved wheeling and dealing and haggling with comic book dealers. It was one of his greatest joys was to go and negotiate with comic dealers. And we had worked together to build up that run of X-Men. And when that was done, we were like, well, what do we do now? And we said, well, let's do Spider-Man comics. And there was a comic shop. The comic shop this comic shop that I absolutely loved used to set up in the flea market in Raleigh, North Carolina. So every weekend, it was like a permanent fixture in the flea market. And he sold records and beer cans and comic books. And we went to his store almost every weekend. And we went there one weekend, and he had just acquired an Amazing Fantasy 15 and an Amazing Spider-Man #1. And I don't remember what my dad paid for them, but I remember he bought them, and the guy was like, well, I'm just leaving early today. And he walked out with us. He closed his shop as we left, and he walked out with us that day because it was such a good day for him.
That's great.
Thank God for my dad. I wish I hadn't sold those comics. Not for the monetary value of them at all, but just I wish I hadn't. I wish I hadn't been so keen on getting rid of them. I wish I hadn't been so keen on this education of mine.
Well, I mean, if it paid for college, I mean, trust me, the story usually is my parents threw them away. I hear it every other day at the store, almost regardless of age. Obviously, from older people, who are collecting in the 50s, 60s, 70s, but even younger people, me, Brock, and Charlie are all about 42, and people our age and even a little bit younger. It's still a common occurrence. We had someone bring me a couple comics where she was clearing out her dad. She said her dad was I think 90, and he had some old Western comics, and she was like, I was just going to throw these away, but I thought maybe they'd be worth something. Yeah, of course. Yeah, from the 40s. Yeah, I mean, they're not worth a ton, but they're still to this day. People are like, are these really worth anything? Yeah, some of them are. So, well, at least you sold them. It didn't toss them. That's the most important part.
Well, Ryan, your story is Walking Dead helped pay for your house. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, again, buy them off the shelf. There's not too many books today that you can do that with, but yeah, that was one of them. That definitely helped a little bit on the down payment. Well, you obviously are writing a ton of comics. Do you find time to read anything these days? You trying to keep up with any of the movies or TV shows, or is it just it's work now and it kind of you're on the opposite side of the equation?
No, I still read. My local comic shop closed a couple of years ago, and I don't get to go to a shop as often as I like. A friend of mine and sometimes co-writer Jimmy Z. Johnston owns a comic shop that's a couple hours away from me. So I visit his store every now and again. Not as frequently over the past year and a half or so, but 2 years. Sure. But yeah, I still read a few. I like I like Barbaric from Vault. I like a lot. I like Good Luck from. I pulled up. I knew you were going to ask me this, and I said, "Well, this time I'm going to pull out the most recent stack of comics I bought." So I liked Good Luck quite a bit from Boom.
That just started.
Mom, Mother of Madness, I think is great. I haven't read it yet, but I was kind of excited. I just realized I didn't see this sitting here. Fear Case from Matt Kent.
And you're at a lot of conventions too, so I mean, there's all obviously you're working, but it's there's stuff there, you're kind of taking
Bunny Mask. I don't read a lot of Marvel or DC stuff anymore.
I read the first couple of Bunny Mask. I really like it. I need to finish it off now. I think
they're doing a. They've already announced a second series.
And that's sold really well for us at the store too. So
yeah, it's actually I think that book's done really well in general. So
it's a cool design. I think it was a pretty striking cover. So people checked out that first issue.
Yeah, and it's gorgeous. It's my friend Andrea Muti, who I work with quite a bit. He's a great artist. So it's an exciting book. I'm glad it's doing well for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then movies. I still watch some of the movies. I don't watch all of the TV shows, and I can't say that I watch all of the movies either. I mean, there are some of those movies, people say, well, they just assume that I've seen it. And I'm like, well, guess what? I haven't watched it. And I never will, chances are.
I mean, I'm even, I never thought I'd live in a day where there was too many comic book things for me. And I'm just like, I can't. I'm just out of time. There's multiple shows and a couple movies where I'm just like, I haven't seen any of these yet. I'm super far behind. It's overflowing of content, which is great, but it's nothing I ever would have expected.
Yeah, it's a comedy of riches, right? I mean, there's so much out there, but it's just you have to figure out where you focus your energy and what little time you might have.
I highly recommend Cullen Bunn's Empty Man film that came out in 2020. Unfortunately, the pandemic kind of killed it as far as a theatrical release, but I can guarantee you a good read or a good watch as far as like horror cult classic. I think it's going to be one of those, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I knew that came out. Did that come to? Is it just a digital release or like a digital purchase, or did that hit a streaming service first? I just don't remember where it went.
It came out in theaters on the absolute worst weekend for a movie to come out in theaters. It came out the weekend everything shut down.
Okay.
So it came out in theaters, and it is currently on HBO Max.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's
cool.
It's been on HBO Max now for I don't know, a month or two, but yes, it's on HBO Max now.
Yeah, I know.
So it suffered like Bloodshot suffered.
I was gonna say Brock went to see Bloodshot.
Like,
that was the
night everything like the next day is when everything shut down.
Yeah, that was the day California shut down.
It's all your fault, Brock.
The Bay Area where we were, and Brock's like, I'm gonna go see Bloodshot because that's my last chance.
I like that was I gotta get out there and see Bloodshot as quickly as humanly possible.
I'm the only one person, and it was Brock.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that really reads Valiant at the shop, so it's like I at least have to go watch the movie.
Yeah,
so somebody will have something to say about this.
Yeah, it was very funny. Well, we'll talk about Heathens too. So you guys have a book. You guys co-wrote it, coming out through Aftershock, and I wanted to get this episode up and recorded and out before the lovely final order cutoff date, which I believe is next Monday, if that is correct.
October 11th.
11th. Okay, perfect. So we got 2 weeks. Plenty of time to get orders in your shop. We all got a chance to read it. Why don't you guys give a little pitch, talk about it a little bit, talk about the process, how it all came about, and I don't know how much you want to spoil from the first issue, but we all enjoyed the first issue quite a bit. We talked about it before you guys came in, and we'll just talk about the whole process and where this came from and kind of pitch it to the listeners.
The secret origin of Heathens.
Yeah.
All right, Heath, pitch it.
All right. I'd always wanted to tell a story that featured, some of the most famous criminals throughout history. There's a reason that they're timeless, right? These are people that you're still talking about, and they were around in the 1700s or 1800s, and they're still vital to pop culture today. So why not tell a story that featured them? And I had the idea of what would happen if the worst criminals started escaping from a version of hell. Like, we don't want to use hell, so to speak. It's kind of our own version of eternity. But who would the stand-in for the devil send to retrieve these souls? And they would send the most notorious people that they could find, right, to bring back these characters, such as like an H.H. Holmes or Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac Killer type people. People that you don't want out on the loose, even if you're the devil, so to speak. So I had that idea, and I went to Cullen, and we had been working together for quite a while now. And, we figured out what we wanted the lineup to be, which is Billy the Kid, which, I've been a massive fan of since Young Guns, Bumpy Johnson. And we figured the best thing to do with that character would to throw in someone that he'd already been at war with. So we had to kind of have that tension between a couple characters. So we brought in Lucky Luciano. And we wanted, obviously we wanted a couple strong female characters. So we brought in Sophia, otherwise known as Sonia, the Golden Hand, who's one of the most prolific con artists in history. And we needed an amazing character to round it out and to really kind of be the leader of this group. And we went with Lady She, who was a actual pirate back in the 1800s. After her husband died, she took over his fleet, and she was in control of and the numbers fluctuate, depending on whoever's writing about it, but she controlled around 1,200 ships, around 70,000 people. She ruled the China Seas, and to the point where she was such a good strategist that she was surrounded at one point and completely got out unscathed. I think she maybe lost one ship when she was surrounded by dozens. And then when she finally decided to hang it up, she negotiated terms where none of her people, including herself, were imprisoned. They were able to keep all the loot that they captured over the years, and were even able to keep a few ships. And she died as an old lady in bed. So I was like, we were like, this is the leader of this team. This is the only person that could bring these people to heal. And she's kind of like our Snake Eyes character. I like to use it as an analogy because there's so many cool G.I. Joe characters, but Snake Eyes is by far the coolest, right? So she's the coolest in a cast of real life historical criminals that are chosen by Joseph Stalin, of all people, to go and chase after the latest escapee from our eternity and do whatever's necessary to bring that criminal back.
So there was I know the comparison we were talking about it beforehand. I was like, oh, this is kind of like an evil League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, right? And I love that concept. It's it feels like, why has someone not done this yet?
Yes.
It definitely feels like this is just a really good concept waiting for someone to dig into.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. I mean, I like the feel of that. The biggest difference, obviously, though, is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen were fictional characters,
right?
And
right.
These are all characters who these characters were they really existed in our world. Not that I Heath is more of the history. He's who we rely on for accurate history, but I wouldn't say this is a necessarily a historical. I wouldn't if you're in school, I wouldn't go write a paper about this book.
Well, and
for your history.
Called
class.
historical fiction for a reason.
Well, and I think
It's all in capitals.
I think when people become this, famous or infamous, they do almost take on like a, like a fictional quality. They become bigger than real life people, right? They these sort of like Billy the Kid is a perfect example of, like, I mean, who doesn't know? They may not know the specific story of what he did and who he was and everything, but people know the name. And there's been more stories about him than his own life, right? So I think with a lot of characters like this, it's easy to sort of, you can expand on their real life history and, obviously dramatize it and make it as interesting as you can. It just seems like a cool idea. For this one, what's the length? How long are you guys? Is this like kind of a mini and see where it goes? Are you guys going ongoing? Do you got a couple story arcs in mind? What's the long term plan?
So,
no spoilers, of course.
Yeah, so we're doing an initial 5-issue arc. There are numerous and that will tell a complete story, but there are numerous. We can return to this well again and again and tell more stories in the world of the Heathens, and not just with these characters. Heath and I've already have talked, ad nauseum of what other characters would join, this group. What would that look like if there were, what other historical figures could we pull into a story, for the next arc? While this tells a complete story, there is just a wealth of possibilities to continue on with it.
Yeah, obviously we'd love to explore characters like Doc Holliday and people like that, especially after watching the Val Kilmer documentary. That's a character that you always want to put on paper, just given that obviously his portrayal it may be more Val than based on any kind of actual history, but it's still a timeless character. And another thing that was important for the characters that we chose, at least for the first arc, is that they all have some kind of redeeming quality, which is what Stalin throws at them to kind of get them to go on this mission. Billy the Kid, he was a killer, yes, but it was mostly because someone murdered the man that took him in off the streets, and he killed for vengeance and to protect his friends. And Bumpy Johnson was a criminal. He got out of prison and found Harlem was being controlled by the Italians, and he wasn't having that. So he went to war with the most powerful criminals in New York City in order to free Harlem from their control. And Lucky Luciano is known as the gangster that started Murder Inc. And organized the mafia. But during World War II, he also protected the Eastern Seaboard. He also used all of the methods that he had to sneak alcohol into the country. He used that for wartime transportation, getting things in and out that the government needed transported. Sophia was a real life Robin Hood. She'd con people out of jewelry and money, and she'd give it away if she wanted to, or found someone that needed it. And then Lady She, she's probably like the least redeemable of all of them, but she also was a young woman that started out as a prostitute and ended up a pirate queen and protected 70,000 men, women, and children, and gave them careers, for lack of a better term. So, that was important to us, that each one of these people has some kind of redeeming quality that makes it realistic that they would do this type of thing.
No, don't want to leave out the artist too. And I believe he's Finnish, so I'm not gonna. If I mispronounce it, let me know. Sammy Cavella. Cavella?
You got
probably
it.
Not.
Yeah, that's it. That sounds right to me.
Okay.
Yeah. He obviously hasn't corrected them, so it's okay.
I know he worked on Undone by Blood, which is also by Aftershock and the Avid comic from Boom. So great art. I mean, you got a black and white advanced copy here, so I'm excited to see the finished version here. But the art's really good too. It totally fits the style of the book. It's these are very different characters to draw. Let's just say, and yeah, they definitely all look they have a really good style. So that's not easy to do.
The art, they crushed it on the art. We couldn't be happier. And wait till you see all 5 covers connect, and they look amazing. And what they did with the art and telling the story and playing with the panels, just it really elevated the writing and the storytelling, much kind of like a Samney does, where he'll take certain aspects of the story that he knows he can convey even better through the art and just elevate things. That definitely is throughout this book.
Well, when you have characters from not only different points in time, but also trying to interact with the modern day, right? I mean, we should say the book takes place in the modern day, and so it's all these characters from the past, all these people from the past now being sent to the present. Yeah, I mean, they're all very different looking, very different styles. So yeah, trying to mesh them all up into one cohesive style is not an easy job, I'm sure. So yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so you guys said you're doing 5 issues. I mean, yeah, no, the second I saw this in the book, I knew we were going to go big on it anyway for the store. So definitely one of those books we're gonna push. And Cullen, I mean, you've had quite a few books. I don't know how much you pay attention to this, but definitely some books in the last couple of years that have kind of hit that speculation buzz a little bit. You've had more than a few. So
what do people think's going on? What are they speculating on?
It's going to be a movie. It's going to make me hundreds of thousands of dollars when somebody's cast as X. I don't know.
If there was a project of yours that seemed more fit to get picked up to make a movie of, I don't know what it is more than this. So like this feels like one that you hopefully you guys get some good buzz on it and you guys get some good orders, even if is from the speculator crowd, because it does feel like it's such a good concept and such an easy thing.
I kid. I'm happy for people to speculate on the books. and
especially your books.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't care if they speculate on anybody else's book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy for them to speculate on the books. And yeah, there's several of my books that I think are ripe for adaptation. There's always, I don't know, Heath knows how many things right now are going on, behind the scenes on that front. There's always a lot of things going on behind the scenes where that's concerned. My goal usually is not to write a comic as a TV or movie pitch. The goal is just to do a good comic.
The anti Mark Millar.
Yeah, well, that's.
I think we've seen this a few times where things were specifically like, what was it, like Cowboys vs. Aliens? I mean, being one of those kind of notorious cases where you can tell the person's kind of end goal here, and if it doesn't read true to the audience, I mean, maybe it'll work as a movie or whatever, but you have to have the original idea and the original material has to be good by itself. And God knows, you guys know this more than anyone, I'm sure. Comic books clearly is where Hollywood is turning its head now to adapt anything. It's the book market has been picked pretty clean, I guess, because then they've turned immediately to comics over the last decade, and it seems like everything is getting licensed, and that's awesome for the creators, especially we've seen how little Marvel and DC really pay their people on the back end. So if people are getting their stuff optioned, even if something never comes from it, that option money is pretty good from as far as I understand it. So.
Speaking of things, any live action Sixth Gun news? I mean,
I'm sure, as you know, Sixth Gun. There was a pilot shot for the Sixth Gun years ago for NBC.
Yeah, because I remember when that book went shot up, and I was like, "What's going on?" Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
And
there
then
was a
nothing ever
pilot,
happened.
there was a pilot some time ago, didn't get picked up as series. But since that time, there has, again, always something going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And where we are right now is I am very, very quiet about that.
It's called an NDA.
Yeah, I am very, very quiet about where we are with the 6 gun right now.
Well, I can ask Heath because I know you guys
Heath
also
doesn't know
work.
anything about the 6 gun.
No, something else. Because you guys also work together with Hustle and Heart Films. So besides all the comic books you guys are working on, there is more to it than just that. You guys also are you do have some IPs in the work for TV film pitches, ideas. Is there anything you guys want to talk about as far as that goes, or?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into it a little bit. We launched the company in 2018. Shortly after I reached out to Cullen, completely cold emailed him and asked him if he wanted to co-write a comic together, and he happened to like the pitch I gave him. Don't ask me why he even responded to me, but like I said, this is
very,
how I
very drunk at the time.
Most likely.
Don't read
Get him drunk.
while you're drunk.
And it's all.
There you go. That's going to be the opening to any query letter you get now, Colin, is how drunk are you when you read this? But so at the time there had been some horror stories, I won't go into specifics, from creators in regards to Hollywood and how they'd been treated and how some of them had lost control of their properties and they were never going to be anything and they felt like they'd never see them back. And we figured there had to be a better way to do things, and we wanted a way for creators to kind of be involved in the process. So, Colin can attest to this. What we do now is we develop the IP that we have from several publishers that we're working with, as well as the other creators, and we will either put it together with that creator as the writer or bring in a seasoned TV veteran to pair them with. Work out a project, put a pitch together based on the book, as close to the original premise as we can. Obviously, it's a different medium, so you got to switch it up a little bit. But, it all comes down to maintaining the passion for that original blood and sweat that was poured into these things, and trying to get them onto television or into film. And we happened to sell our first 2 shows right out of the gate. Later 2018, one to CW, one to Showtime. Unfortunately, neither of them went. That's the nature of the beast in this industry. If you bat 200, you're in the Hall of Fame. One is actually a project that's going to be coming out through Lion Forge Comics / Oni that we signed kind of like a publishing deal with them in 2019. We have 4 books that are going to be coming out through them in 2022, 2023. But, what we love working with creators and giving them a place to excel and try to become the next Rick Remender or the next Kirkman that are writing for TV, or Brubaker, who's writing for film and TV now. Because let's face it, 120% of the things that you see on TV and film are based on some kind of IP. And as you said, Ryan, lately it's comics, right? But you don't know who these comics are from a majority of the time. And a lot of the time the creators are lost in the fold. And, Marvel's making billions, God bless them. But how much of Thor Ragnarok was based on Greg Pak's Planet Hulk, stuff like that. Starlin and all those guys for Thanos and everything. So it's creators first and foremost, but we love telling stories on all formats. So we want to get into podcasts and television, films, and do as much as we can with as much as we can, because all we do is write 24/7.
Well, and it seems like these days it's not just it's a movie and that's the thing and that's it. There's a book adaptation. There's a comic. There's a podcast. There, God knows how many podcasts there are now related to actual media properties.
Isn't there one like for like Walking Dead, Witcher, Expanse? Like every show out there seems to have a podcast attached to it.
Yeah, official and unofficial, right?
Yeah.
Video games, mobile games, experiences outside, virtual experiences or physical. I'm sure COVID probably has made the last couple of years interesting for trying to get new projects off the ground. But yeah, there's so much. People are thirsty for anything at this point. It really feels like a lot of stuff is just everything's taking off, everything's clicking, right? People want distractions, especially in the last 18 months. People are looking for just the next anything. So,
I mean, if you were to poll your listeners, how many would know that Road to Perdition was based on a graphic novel and History of Violence was based on a graphic novel? Like, these are amazing films, but they were really great comics first and foremost.
There's a show on Netflix, I think it's Netflix right now, called Midnight Mass, and I paused and I was like, did I miss an announcement?
That's a Vertigo book, right?
Did that get is this a DC thing? And I look, and it's not. It's just it's just the same name. And for a second, I was like, oh, did they make a comic out of it or a show out of this? Because sure, why not? Right? Everything is, yeah. Books, movies like Red or, I'm sure, like you mentioned Mark Miller. I'm sure most people don't know that stuff's based on comics, right? Wanted or what's the other one? Kick-Ass probably people do, but
Wanted was another one. Yeah. We have a couple projects with Vertigo Entertainment who did Stephen King's It and Stan, the most recent adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a really good relationship with them. We have a couple projects in the works with Powerhouse Animation, who does Castlevania and Masters of the Universe on Netflix. And we're working with Cloud9 Productions on another one, who's owned by Eric Olson, who's on Hawaii Five-0. So we've got some great partners that we're working with on some projects that are either in-house or based on IP that, we kind of represent as producers.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple other publishers that we work with. We work with the new Behemoth Comics. That's a new relationship. We work with Outland Entertainment, Blue Moon Publishers out of Canada, and Apex Books. I highly recommend checking out all their stuff. Their books are great quality, good reads across the board. And Outland does like games, board games, stuff like that. They really touch on everything.
Behemoth is one of those newer comic companies that we've actually seen a little bit of success with at the store.
You promised me Darkness is the one, right?
Yeah. I know when a lot of companies launched, and then they launched with quite a few books, not right out the gate, but over the course of the first year or two. I was like, we'll see how this goes. But they got some really, they kind of feel like Vault and like early Boom, like they kind of have that feeling. Scout, similar grouping as those guys, and those are all publishers that are doing really well for us. So there's just like people are really excited right now for. I mean, Marvel and DC are always going to do well. I don't have to worry about them. You could go back, I don't know, 5-6 years. There were points where I was like, do I even carry indie stuff at the shop anymore? Like, graphic novels sell well, but they're just, the single issues are just kind of dying on the vine. And like, there just isn't a lot of excitement. And then something has happened in the content's really good is what it is. People are cranking out some of the best independent comics that they've ever been made. And our numbers across the board, every genre, every company has gone up. And there's such a swing. And it doesn't even feel like it's away from the superhero stuff because those numbers are still really good. There's just people are expanding what they're reading and new people are coming in for that content. Especially the horror books. All the horror comics are doing really well. Crime, those genres that have kind of been underserved from the bigger companies through the years. And yeah, it's great to see the indie guys. Not only getting, all the support from the comic industry, but getting things optioned, getting things made into TV shows or movies. Everyone's, it's a lot of work, a lot more work than just putting out a comic book and just sitting there. This is a lot. I'm sure you guys are very, very busy with all the behind the scenes stuff.
I was going to
That's great.
say, I feel like the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, I've been extremely busy, and I don't know that I've written a word. It's there's the side of things people don't see is that being a comic book writer, 6 weeks full time, I haven't written a word, but I've been working. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that has nothing to do with actually writing and everything else to do with, especially when you're working with indie comics, there's so much that you have to do to just keep it, keep the books alive. Not only that, but keep the pipeline primed, so to speak.
You got to get the hype train, keep it going.
Keep the hype train going. But then I need to make sure that when Heathens is wrapped, we're done writing it. But I needed to make sure when Heathens was over, I had something else. I had another project ready to go because it's one of the worst feelings as a freelance comic writer is finding there's not, it's the worst feeling's not even not having something to work on. It's that dread you feel when you're wrapping up a series and there's nothing afterwards. That's an awful feeling, and I want to avoid it at all costs. So
I see creators kind of talk about this online occasionally, where they feel like they some don't like to kind of promote their own stuff or push their own stuff, but I'm like, no one's going to do it but you. You have to. That's the job. You're your biggest cheerleader. You have to be.
No one's going to like me as much as I like me. So
you have to. You have to.
You can even have a high-powered agent in the industry, and they're still not going to shop you nearly as often as you're going to shop yourself.
Right.
You're going to set your own meetings. You're going to make your own connections. And it's funny that you brought up Scout. The owner of Scout actually used to be my lit agent way back in the day. And then he left to go turn Macmillan Books into films and television. And he kept in contact with me, and that's how I kind of became a producer, because he took me under his wing and he gave me access to his Rolodex, and I just started building my own relationships through that, because he had so many books to work with and didn't have the bandwidth to handle it on his own. So he'd give me a few titles to work with as I was the backroom manager at Barnes and Noble at the time. We actually the first show we developed and sold. I was still a backroom manager at the time.
So what did you do for Barnes and Noble? Backroom manager?
I was
for the company.
Receiving.
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Just for like the bigger company.
They completely eradicated the position throughout the company.
Oh boy,
it's mind-boggling to me. But as far as like getting graphic novels into the bigger brick and mortar stores,
yep.
I had to personally go in and order, all of Harrow County and stuff like that. A bunch of Image titles that you would assume are automatically going to be in those stores. I had to go in and order them. And the very next pull down cycle, those books would be getting pulled off the shelf, which is like 2 months after I ordered them in. So I'd have to go in and, put them back into our stock. And I'm like, no, these are going to sell. You just have to have them on the shelf.
Yeah.
And it was mind numbing how many times these great titles, I had to keep trying to bring back into a store. Descender, Manor Black and stuff like that. You need to have this selection, because that's the only way you're going to sell them. It's the only way these people most of the people that don't read comics, it's the only way they're going to find them. So they're not going to go and ask to special order something. You have to have it on the shelf.
Right.
And it changes store to store, obviously, but I think it might get better now that Penguin is so tied to the distribution, of especially Marvel. But I think other people are going to go that route. I know you guys talk about that a lot.
Yeah,
Like I could see Image heading there too.
That's how you know things are changing in the comic industry when Penguin, who's going to now be, basically the book distributor in America. Once the Simon and Schuster deal wraps up, that's it, right? Like they're the distributor for books. They're the biggest one, I think, without question. But if they're pushing so hard for comics, even single issues, they wouldn't do this if like the industry was dying tomorrow. I'm sure you've heard us talk about how annoying that is when people are like, "Oh, comic industry's dying." It's like, no, it's fine, guys. It's fine. It's different, but it's fine. You wouldn't have places like Penguin Random House. They wouldn't care, right? If it was dying, if it was going away, if they weren't selling it.
They wouldn't be building dedicated warehouses to doing this stuff. They wouldn't be investing the money if there wasn't money to be made in single issue comics.
Trust me, I'm in the retailer forum. They would not deal with the retailers in the retailer forum if there wasn't a ton of money to be made, because comic book stores need some hand holding and some
hand holding. You're being really nice.
Well, some unique file structures. The comics are very different than novels, and I think Penguin's like, they're kind of figuring out like, oh, this is a very different beast, but it's obviously they're not going to abandon it. It's going to hopefully, I assume, a big part of their industry. So, yeah.
It's a little terrifying though, imagining what the shipping is going to be like. Because that was my job, was to handle the boxes that came into these stores, and I worked in a bookstore, but would refuse to buy my graphic novels there because I'm one of those freaks that needs it perfect. I don't want the bent corners. I don't want any of that stuff. I'm there with you,
man. I'm there with you.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm going to drop that much money on a hardcover, it better be mint condition. So, that was all they were sending. So the floppies is terrifying me, to be honest.
We are scheduled to receive our first shipment in 1 week. We will talk about it on the podcast for sure. It is going to be a big deal.
They have sent variant covers in T-mailers.
Yeah, those Fantastic Four books. Yeah.
So, there's a little hope. That was way better than that mom sign fiasco that we got from Diamond. So
they have been very upfront that they realize the comic audience is very different than the book audience. And, but I worked at a bookstore
come on, you can remember it.
Crown Books. That's the name of it. I worked at Crown Books for a year. But even there, like, before they went out of business, even there, like, people cared about condition of their books. It wasn't like people were just taking any beat up thing off the shelf. Like, no, even in the bookstore, people cared about condition. So,
you're not gonna sell a mass market book if the front cover is bent.
Yeah,
I got 2 copies of Children of Dune here from Amazon that are beat to shit, and I'm like,
yeah.
I got a third one over here that I'm like, fine,
third one
I'll
coming.
take this one. I'm like,
yeah.
Can't you folks appreciate patina?
What was that?
Can't you appreciate patina? I don't know. That's what they say on those antique roadshows.
No, I don't like going into a used bookstore is a different thing. I expect it to be beat up.
About it. I want my book to roll like tumbleweeds down the aisle.
Do you need a copy of The Children of Dune?
I do not.
Trust me, if you're grabbing comics off the shelf and you're shoving them in your back, rolling them up and in your back pocket, God bless. Like, go for it. That's awesome. But like, not everyone's like that. So not a lot. Not most people. So
you get a lot of the egg guy in the comic book store.
Yeah.
I just love the fact that we're having this conversation without Toby here, who is by far the most particular of all of us.
Yeah, our guy Toby is the guy that will take every copy off the shelf and look at the spine and compare 3 copies, put them next to me. He's the guy, right? And every shop has probably a couple of them. So
he's the one that wants you to order 2 statues, so he at least has a shot of getting a better one.
Pick the better box.
Oh my gosh, don't tell Toby how many statue boxes I threw away this past week. I was like, for God's sakes, I'm never putting them back in the box. I'm just throwing them away.
I went through that about a year ago. I just looked in the room where I kept all the boxes. I'm like, okay, all these boxes are going out to the curb. I can't do this anymore.
I'm I'm getting close. We have to redo my attic, and I'm like, do I just toss all this? Like, I just think I need to get rid of these. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I did that with a bunch of computer equipment and like old computer boxes, and I'm like, why do I have this like modem box from like 15 years ago? What possible use would I ever have for this? So trust me, you're like, yeah, I've done my own
to a
purging.
museum. I don't.
No, yeah, like why do I even have this? Well, it's been fantastic talking to you guys. Anything you want to other works you want to talk about or pitch before we go? Any last words on Heathen?
Well, we could be here for an hour if you want Cullen to pimp the rest of his
Yeah,
stuff.
I was gonna say everything he's got coming up and everything he's done. Where do you start?
As far as Heathens, it's a read that we go into a little bit of the history of the characters in issue 2, but for the most part, I'd say it's calling like 85-90% action. It's not going to be a read that you're not going to sit down and think you're reading prose. It's a very exciting story, and you're going to run through it and hopefully want to read it again and again.
I mean, when I read the first issue that you guys let us take a look at, it flowed really well. You just dropped us right into something and just went with it, and it was like, okay, I'm along for the ride. I'm going. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I read a lot of number ones. I don't read a lot of number twos. Right? We get advanced copies of a ton of books, and I try to at least scroll through or read or scroll through pretty much all the number ones that I get from the publishers. And it's so tough when trying to set up a new universe, a new world, new characters, and all this stuff because you have so few pages. It used to be like, give it an arc or whatever. These days, people don't even give it an issue. Like you have to hook people with a concept and a pitch from page one. And this was a book that I read the first issue and I was like, yes, I will be back for number 2. And like I said, it really doesn't happen as often as I wish it did. It's tough, but you guys really nailed that first issue. So
that's awesome to hear. Thank you very much. I mean, I look at writing like Elmore Leonard did. Like, if you can't convey it through great dialogue, don't bother putting it on the page. So, if we can keep the beats moving between action and really, good back and forth between the characters, I think the momentum holds up throughout. And I know that's just as important to Cullen. That's what we aim for to get on the page.
I like that Heath just low key compared himself to Elmore Leonard.
Caught that, did you? Well, Justified is the best show ever written.
Justified is awesome.
Yes, and it's mostly because Elmore Leonard was on set probably every day. But not to take anything away from Graham Yost, he's a great writer, but that was a great series because of the dialogue.
Well, I too am much like Elmore Leonard. Heathens. The final order cutoff's coming up in just a couple of weeks. I think from when this airs, and then I've got a couple other books currently coming out. The last book you'll ever read is coming out from Vault right now. Lucky Devil is coming out from Dark Horse. Both are probably good reads for Halloween season. If you have kids or you're young at heart, I have a book called The Ghoul Next Door that came out from HarperCollins just a short time ago. It's an original graphic novel it's a middle reader's graphic novel for spooky kids and for kids at heart. So
don't we call them goth kids?
Checking. No, goth kids. They're Dover. There aren't any goth kids anymore, are there?
Ryan, you're talking
I'm the youngest goth in America, so yeah. Well, we didn't even kind of hit on that, right? I mean, we have the all ages, young adult, kids market, call it whatever you want. I think there's actually multiple markets in there, which is exploding right now. And going back to like the Penguin Random House conversation, obviously every book distributor is trying to get involved, and book publishers getting involved in that too. So this is not just like some fly by night thing. Like this is a massive change to the comic industry that's going to be, it's going to dividends down the road too, keeping people involved in the the comic market in some fashion, whether it's Dogman and Captain Underpants and things like that, or
we talked
single
about
issues.
We talked about this on the podcast a few weeks ago or at least episode or two ago, about DC and Marvel not having a consistent kids single issue comic, and I think that also we don't necessarily have those. Like a lot of them go to like original graphic novels, but it'd almost be nice to have something that was like single issue for kids. That's just kind of just like fun little middle school stories, or just like something that might like a Halloween theme thing or something. Just
there's a little bit out there, but not as much as I think we'd like.
So I mean, to get a little inside baseball, I think a lot of the draw for this is because of the streamers. It's high demand, especially for ages 9 to 14.
Yeah.
That's kind of Disney's sweet spot, and everybody wants to
the tween market.
Disney.
It's the tween market.
So it's huge, and everybody knows that so much of the industry is based off IP now that they're going to start cranking out books within that age range to try to obviously take advantage of that. But the key is to tell a good story first and foremost, right? Like, you want to make sure that the book is worth these kids sitting down and reading,
right,
before you worried about it being adapted into something else. That's key, and unfortunately, it's not always the case. But Cullen definitely nailed it with his HarperCollins book, and I can speak to the fact that he did that way before the industry kind of shifted in that direction, because him and Kat have been working on that thing tirelessly for a year and a half now,
longer,
something like that.
It's longer than that. It's been a while, yeah.
But I mean, I think that's going to be the case for a lot of what's coming out through comics in the future, is what's being driven by the other industries. And to speak to what you're saying earlier, like Vertigo disappeared, right? So, but now we ended up with like 5 different Vertigos, and
right.
They're all putting out really quality stuff, and they all excel at specific kind of genres. I mean, how many comics would you have seen sold the way they are now of just regular family drama before Jeff Lemire was doing it, right? Like Terry Moore, maybe, but his stuff is so indie. Like, he's got his devout fans, but it's I mean, how he's not reaching millions of people. Maybe if something gets adapted, which they absolutely should be. But I mean, the indie stuff is great right now.
No, like I said, no doubt about it. Like I said before, we went from kind of like, maybe I should just get rid of our indie section for single issues, and to like, how do I expand it? There's so much good stuff. We're selling so much of it, and it's shocking how much things have changed in the last couple of years. But it's because of creators like you guys that are actually putting a effort into the single issues. I mean, not everyone is. There's a lot of stuff going straight to graphic novel now, and as a comic store, that is still very much a single issue focused store. We definitely appreciate it. So Heath is number 1. If your comic store does orders, it's on FOC, or your order cutoff on October 11th. So let your comics shop know it is scheduled to be released in stores November 3rd.
No. Quick question about this.
So you can.
There's not 50 bajillion variant covers on this thing, are there?
I don't. Just the one.
There's one that's you can buy now,
store exclusives and stuff.
Yeah. There's at least 7 or 8 store exclusives that I know that are.
No, store exclusives are fine. They're buying in. They're doing that. I understand, but you didn't do like 60 different covers for now.
No,
I would have loved it, but I also would have hated it, because I would have had to buy every single one. I'm a completionist in that way, and being that this is like my first, I guess, quote unquote, major publication, like I would have had to do a poster of each individual cover. So,
and can you imagine what Toby would be doing in your store with 60 covers? How long it would take him to to check for dents and dings on all 60 of those?
Aftershock is
They're
reasonable with their variant
Yeah,
covers.
they're good.
Variant covers are very important. People love them, but there's sometimes too many. Aftershock is very reasonable with their variants. So, all right. Thank you guys very much. We're all looking forward to Heathens, and we will definitely have you guys back on at some point if you got more stuff to talk about, other projects. Yeah, that's it. We're going to go ahead and wrap up.
Thanks so much for having us, guys.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. As I said, before we got on the air, I'm a longtime listener of the show, so this was great.
Oh, that's great. That's love to hear it. I
am sorry for everything that we've cost you, your wallet, or if we've made you angry at any moment.
Well, we are definitely.
Ryan's got some hot takes, but
whoa, trust me, I know I'm full of shit most of the time. Trust me, I'm horrible. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I was gonna say we've all been longtime readers of Cullen, and hopefully yours too, Heath. So hopefully this project works good, and you guys get more coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much.
You said
it's really
excellent.
See,
thank you.
I'm just holding out hope for the nice oversized hardcover like I have for Six Gun.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Charlie, you have no idea, man. I get so frustrated over comics that have a long run, but you only see one or two hardcovers out of the entire thing.
Yeah.
Nothing drives me crazier than that. So I hear you. I'm right there with you.
Well, we'll bug Aftershock for it. We'll bug Aftershock. So, all right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.